welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and it is August 15th, 2014, the Feast of the Ascension, and it's also the famous Feria Augusta, the harvest festival established by the Emperor Augustus at this time of year, because, of course, at this point, the European wheat harvest is in. And we're also passing, as we will discuss later in the show, we're passing through all these anniversaries of the First World War. But as we always, that binocular view of history, it's the one that's recommended by Confucius, it's the one that's recommended by Machiavelli, and that is one eye very much fixed on current events, the other eye fixed on history more or less ancient, according to the specific relevance. So, what are we looking at right now? A very hot situation. The Anglo-American mad dog imperialists are very much on the march. We are told that the adventurer who claims to be the president of Ukraine, the chocolate baron, the chocolate soldier, Poroshenko, or as we prefer to call him, Pornoshenko. We call him Pornoshenko because his policies are obscene. His threat to world peace is obscene. This imperialist stooge, Pornoshenko, is apparently working together with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. That seems to be the imperialist combination operative right now. Obama, unfortunately, too lazy, too feckless to get his hands dirty in this stuff. So he leaves it to Joe and Joe's mediocre, corrupt, nepotist son. Remember, a while ago we had clashes with Beau Biden, the Attorney General of Delaware. His idea of running a campaign was to put critics into the D.C. jail on fake Delaware warrants. This time we're dealing with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and that's the conveyor belt of aggressive imperialist policy to Comrade Pornoshenko there in Kiev. So what we're learning, Pornoshenko is coordinating every step with Cameron, perfide Albion. If we wanted to, as we've been discussing over these past weeks, if we want to assign war guilt to the events of 1914, Sir Edward Grey, Lord Jackie Fisher, Edward VII, his networks, and in particular his son, George V. Last week we had George V telling Sir Edward Grey, as if he needed to be told, Grey, you must find a pretext to embroil Britain and the British Empire in war against Germany. And lots of people listening to this show have had relatives killed as a result of that despicable policy. Well, now we've got Cameron coordinating with Pornoshenko. This is extremely ominous for the peace of the world, and it points to the adventurism. The New York stock market has taken a dive today, minus 200 points, and that's just a blip. But they're concerned. It's very interesting. The sort of the soft networks, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, right, the pure propaganda networks where nothing is at stake but opinions. They tend to ignore Ukraine, but the one where you could find out all about Ukraine today was CNBC because it compelled attention because the insiders, the finance oligarchs and predators were dumping stocks, minus 200 in a very short period of time. The U.S. bond market, however, getting up because of the flight to safety, the flight to quality. So this is what it looks like. The Ukrainians are now boasting that their artillery has destroyed part of a column of Russian tanks. And this is the story they're telling, which I do not trust, is that overnight between Thursday and Friday, Thursday the 14th, Friday the 15th, the Ukrainian president, Poroshenko, once again, obviously with Cameron whispering in his ear, right, with all that accumulated perfidy of the British Foreign Office, right, the troublemakers and meddlers of Europe and the world. Poroshenko says that during the night, and this is, of course, reported by who? By the BBC. The BBC is the main source on this. A Russian armored column is alleged by Kiev to have entered Ukrainian territory overnight, and then the gallant, invincible supermen of Kiev fought back on Friday by shelling those Russian tanks. A major military escalation, if true. Now, the word from the Russian Foreign Ministry is there are no Russian tanks or armored personnel carriers on Ukrainian territory, and rather what's going on here is a Ukrainian attempt to sabotage the Russian relief column. We know the Ukrainian official position has been, there is no humanitarian crisis in the east of Ukraine. Everything is hunky-dory, even as the Soldateska of the Kiev fascist clique, these right sector neo-Nazi hoodlums, are bombarding cities, right? They're firing grads and rockets and so forth into Donetsk and Lugansk, responding to this real and existing humanitarian emergency. The Russian government put together a convoy of 280 trucks, a beautiful thing to see, white trucks containing water, food, medicine, tents, the usual humanitarian relief supplies. It is now 20, 30 Ks from the Ukrainian border, and it's going to be done with the negotiation with the Ukrainian fascist authorities under the auspices of the International Committee for the Red Cross. But the question is, once that convoy is into what is on the map Ukraine, will it get right into the so-called separatist areas, the areas controlled by the pro-Russian forces? This is clearly an attempt by the Ukrainians to use artillery bombardment to cut the roads that the 280 trucks would take to get to their actual destination. And we have to point out also that the Ukrainian answer to this situation are insignificant, inconsequential little convoys. There's one of 75 trucks. Well, 280 trucks is way better than 75 trucks, wouldn't you say? It's about 4 times better when the quantity is the main thing. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry says that they are receiving direct threats of military action from Kiev, saying, if you bring that convoy, or we're guessing now what the if is, if you do something, Russia, then we, Ukrainian fascist regime, will respond by doing this, that, and the other thing. It is Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who points out that the alleged bombardment is an attempt to stop access by the humanitarian relief convoy to the areas where it is needed. NATO, under Foch of War Rasmussen, right, the little twerp who he got his start by backing Mad Dog Bush's Iraq war policy. And, of course, this Foch Rasmussen is very much in the tradition of Denmark, heavy Nazi collaboration during World War II, the model protectorate. So the model protectorate, again, he says the Russians are escalating while they talk cooperation. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's the 15th of August, Ferragosto, and best wishes to all our listeners there on the beaches of the Mediterranean in Portugal, Spain, Italy, and France, and Bavaria. We're with you in spirit on Ferragosto. So it's the height of the European summer vacation exodus. This was, of course, a factor in the unleashing of World War II was that World War I, all the key people were on vacation, right? What did we say? That Churchill was at the beach with his kids. Lord Grey was fishing trout. Asquith was in the mountains, or whatever it was, and that's not good, right? Europeans get serious and break with this insane U.S. policy, which is not even Obama's policy necessarily. It seems once again to be this other group, the warmonger group, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden. We have to assume that Kerry and Samantha Power, the war hoe, that they're involved, and then Cameron, right? So it's the collection. We're going to get to the Israelis in just a minute because they're undoubtedly a part of it. So the situation now is that the Ukrainians, they claim that they've been shooting up a bunch of Russian tanks. Never a good thing to do. But that's what they're claiming. Now, they may be talking through their hat. The British Foreign Office is meddling openly. Not only is Cameron whispering in Poroshenko's ear, but the Foreign Office, the new Foreign Secretary, the latest nonentity in that post, the latest heir to the perfidy of Sir Edward Grey, has called in the Russian ambassador to demand explanations. And once again, remember, it's principally the BBC reporter who said, I saw Russian tanks or armored personnel carriers cross the border into Ukraine yesterday. While the humanitarian convoy was 40 Ks from the border, he claims that some tanks or armored vehicles went across. And he's got some pictures on social media, but of course those could be anything, right? They're just APCs on a road. This all comes despite the conciliatory remarks by Putin during the week, right, that he was not getting ready to break with the international system. Maybe he needs to consider breaking with the international system. Maybe now things have changed. So we've got Ferragosto of blood and gunfire on that Ukraine-Russian border. There will be a meeting of Lavrov with this the latest Ukrainian fascist nonentity foreign minister on Sunday. And the jitters on Wall Street were quite serious. They trotted at a guy from Wells Fargo saying, "Oh, we're sure it's going to be contained. It's got to be contained. If it's not, then your entire crazy market structure comes down." So obviously, we are in firm support of the Russian position. We're anti-fascist here. That makes us pro-Russian, and in particular, this Kiev gang. We're told that the warmongers of Europe, the ones that are willing to go along with the Biden Ukrainian policy, are, first of all, the British, of course, Cameron, and the Foreign Office. Secondly, we have Poland and the hot-headed, reckless Foreign Minister Sikorski, that is to say, Mr. Ann Applebaum, wife being a correspondent of the op-ed columnist of the Washington Post, and Lithuania, that wonderful bastion of democracy way out there, right? Of course, it's also a nest for Nazi sympathizers, right? It's where the big holidays of the year tend to be the commemorations of the SS divisions of Hitler. So the more America knows about that, the less they're going to be inclined to get into trouble for the sake of Lithuania. Now we have all kinds of whining here. Yesterday we have George Will the shill, Obama's reckless caution. In other words, you've got to be more active. You've got to deter people. That's Will the shill. And then more extreme, Charles Krauthammer what Hillary got right. Now, we're going to talk about this, but Hillary Clinton has proven to us once again that she is a warmonger and a warmonger and a warmonger. And the word is now that she believes that she will have no considerable opposition in the Democratic primaries. Hillary thinks she's a shoo-in. She thinks that the coronation has been consummated and that she's the queen. And therefore, she does not have to play to the Democratic base, which is anti-war. If it's anything, it's anti-war. Hopefully, the humanitarian bombing of Samantha Power and people like this has not perverted the Democratic base down to its marrow. So the Democratic base is still anti-war. I think that's still a given. I hope so. If not, bad news. But with the Democratic base being anti-war, Hillary nevertheless thinks that she can assert herself as a warmonger. Because when she says, don't do stupid stuff, is not an organizing principle for a great power. What she's saying is war, military conflict is the organizing principle she has in mind. She is a neocon in the sense of Carl Schmitt. Remember him? The granddaddy intellectually of these neocons, and of course then Leo Strauss. And if you want to get some good quotes from the two of those, 9/11 synthetic terror made in USA is where you should look for them. Any edition from the first to the fifth is going to have those quotes. So take a quick look. That, as Schmidt says, the only thing you have to know in politics is who's the enemy. The enemy image, das Feindbild, is the way you organize a society. And of course, what he meaning to say is the only way you can justify an oligarchical, stratified, hierarchical, and oppressive society with low, rotten social mobility is with an outside threat. Okay, fine. So Hillary's embracing that already. Now, I speak to Democrats who might vote in Democratic primaries. Don't let us get to a situation where it's either Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Walker, some bloody monster against Hillary, and then argue to us that Hillary is the lesser evil, and that she might be. But let's fight hard now to make sure we don't get to that. Back to the World Crisis Radio. Do get a copy of 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA. Any edition will have this wonderful array of quotes and analysis about the neocon tradition from Carl Schmitt, Hitler's lawyer, that's who he was, Hitler's lawyer, and then Leo Strauss, the daddy of the American wing of these neocons. And Hillary has now gotten herself very, very close to that she wants, obviously, organize American society according to war. This is unacceptable. And it is now the responsibility of the Democratic base to save the country. Because if you get to a situation where it's Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Walker, or some other monster against Hillary, well, then you're damned. Then you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if you get Hillary, you'll get a war. And I suppose you're going to get a war on the other side. Because remember, little Rand Paul is one of the most breathtaking hypocrites, flip-floppers that we've ever seen. Remember, he didn't like drones until he did like drones. And he's flip-flopped on other issues, right? He was very dovish on Ukraine until he saw that the militaristic, jingoistic, chauvinist soul of the Republican Party would not allow that. Now you see little Rand is trying to say that the police are too heavily armed. Well, the police are too heavily armed. The police are too militarized. They're too arrogant. They're too impudent. That's for sure. But that's not a reason to support little Rand Paul. Sorry, I'm confused between the two little leprechauns. So let's just think about this foreign policy stuff, right? Obama under attack. I would attack Obama for not putting an end to the Ukrainian crisis. Well, these neocons, they're essentially attacking him for not escalating the Ukrainian crisis. Here we have Charles Krauthammer, what Hillary got right. He quotes her, "Great nations need organizing principles, and don't do stupid stuff is not an organizing principle." There's also the report that in the last week or 10 days at a meeting of Obama with congressional leaders, House and Senate, this corker was putting on a usual bombastic, self-serving display of holier-than-thou warmongering, and Obama's answer was horse manure. Yes, horse manure coming out of the mouth of our dear friend Corker. He should cork it. This character obviously they want war. Whether they know it or not, and whether they say it or not, they're talking about policies that are very likely to lead to war. So Krauthammer is, of course, shocked that Obama does these things, and Krauthammer grudgingly expresses his tremendous admiration for Hillary, and then he goes on to quote Obama, right? That Obama says Putin could invade Ukraine, and if he does, quote, "trying to find our way back to a cooperative functioning relationship with Russia during the remainder of my term," Obama talking, "will be much more difficult." Horrors, says Krauthammer. What kind of talk is that? Poland is vulnerable. Poland and other U.S. vulnerable allies are shocked, and it's a shock to the Baltic republics. Well, let me tell you, in the name of the American people, Poland and the Baltic Republic had republics, and above all Lithuania, the biggest one. You guys had better deal with it, because the American people are not going to fight and die for your demagogic politicians. A country like Poland that put up with the regime, the dictatorship of the Kaczynski twins for a couple of years, has lost all moral authority. And in Lithuania, with this woman that you have there, I won't go into various speculations about her, but this is no good. The American people say no to war, no to fascism, no to demagogic, two-bit, tin pot politicians whose only stock in trade is Russophobia and anti-Sovietism après la lettre. So let's give a case in point now. There's another demagogic politician that the American people are tired of supporting, right? It's not just people in Warsaw or in Lithuania. Now we've got to talk about Netanyahu. Here we have the Wall Street Journal, Thursday, August 14th. Israel outflanks White House. And here's what it is. The Israelis, using their military-to-military connections, have essentially done an end run around Obama and Rice and Kerry and all these people, all of our wonderful servants of the state here. And they have been helping themselves to the Pentagon arms delicatessen, and at the same time telling the Congress, we want more, make it snappy, send that money today, and so forth. So here's the headline. The White House and the State Department were trying to convince the Israelis to cool it on Gaza. You know, try to blow up a few fewer schools, kill a few fewer kids. But the official government here in Washington was caught off guard last month when they learned that the Israeli military had been quietly securing supplies of ammunition from the Pentagon without their approval, or the Pentagon, as we're hearing from all those imperial British voices all over our media now. We're seeing the world through British eyes, and we're hearing the world through British mouths, and that for some of us is beginning to grate, especially because of Cameron's direct line to porno. So this is now a situation of bureaucratic tension. We had last Wednesday a very combative phone call between Obama and Netanyahu. And the word is, of course, that let's see if we get the exact quote for you. that Netanyahu is reckless and irresponsible. He's a devil-may-care warmonger. And, of course, Netanyahu, like the Poles, like the British, like the Lithuanians, eager to fight to the last American. So here we go. This is the Wall Street Journal view. Many in the Obama administration say the Gaza conflict, the third between Israel and Hamas in less than 6 years, has proven to them that Netanyahu and his national security team are both reckless and untrustworthy. Reckless and untrustworthy. Oh, the Israelis, of course, like Krauthammer and Will, the Obama administration is weak and naive, but therefore the Israelis bypass the White House in favor of allies in Congress and elsewhere in the administration. Now, my friends, we have written about the rogue network, the secret government, the invisible government, the parallel government, the rogue network, the deep state, this town, it's sometimes called, or anybody or nobody. It means oligarchs, all oligarchs or no oligarchs. Here is an example of the rogue network at work. So what goes on here is the Israelis are afraid they're running out of the missiles for the dome, the Iron Dome system, right? The Iron Dome interceptor rockets are running out because they're using so many, right? Maybe these Palestinian rockets are not so effective, but they do. Every time you shoot one down, it's a few $100,000. It's a question: is it 100,000 or is it 700,000? Right? You can bankrupt them even if you can't defeat them militarily. On July 20th, Israel's defense ministry asked the U.S. military, not the government here, but the military, for a range of munitions, including 120 millimeter mortar shells and 40 millimeter illuminating rounds that they said were already pre-positioned in Israel. So they want to help themselves, and then they go ahead and do it. We'll have a little bit more about this in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're just delving into this fascinating Wall Street Journal article, Thursday, August 14th. Israel outflanks White House in pressing Gaza strategy. So the Israelis help themselves to the arms bazaar, arms delicatessen, paid for by the American taxpayer. So here it was. Unknown to many policy makers, Israel was moving on separate tracks to replenish supplies of lethal ammunition being used in Gaza and to expedite approval of the Iron Dome funds on Capitol Hill. So when the one thing is on July 20th, they demand 120 millimeter mortar shells, 40 millimeter illuminating rounds. Those are those things you've seen on TV coming down slowly, right? The flares, so to speak. Those were already stored in Israel, but that was for U.S. use in other places in the Middle East. The request was approved through military channels, Pentagon only, meaning rogue network only. The rogue network, for obvious reasons, has to be strong in the Pentagon. That is what 9/11 taught us. That's what we've learned in Iran-Contra or other similar events, right? The old Erich von Marbod and other people in there. Okay, so it was approved on the 23rd of July, not made public. So the Israelis got their request. No presidential approval or sign off by the Secretary of State was required or sought. Yeah, but still, a government has to look after those things. Then we have this incident where the U.S. sends Netanyahu a draft. They're expecting to get feedback on the draft and then a second draft, but Netanyahu gives it immediately to his war cabinet. That rubbed these guys here the wrong way. And then we had this famous event where on the ceasefire, Israel and Egypt wanted to eliminate Qatar and Turkey along with Hamas, but Kerry, obviously playing to the Qatar-Turkey-Hamas axis, tried to get them back in, give them some leverage. So we're told here Kerry is completely out of sync with Israel, not just on a governmental level, but on a societal level, says this character Michael Oren. He's the slickster, the fast-talking former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. The best thing that Kerry can do is to stay out, says Oren. This reminds us of the moment where the Israelis are publishing things on when genocide is justifiable, right? Then the Israelis hit a few more schools, and it turns out it's the U.S. 120 millimeter and 40 millimeter rounds that are being supplied. We were blindsided, says a U.S. Diplomat. The Israelis are using artillery, precisely 120 millimeter, not smart bombs. Therefore, you're going to hit more civilians. And it's all done through military to military channels. They were demanding Hellfire missiles. And then the White House and the State Department have demanded that the Pentagon consult them. And, of course, the Palestinians, seeing what seems to be obvious, they say the U.S. is a partner in this crime. McCain says, he says the Israelis were demanding the money urgently because they were running out of interceptors and could not hold out for a month. The other Bopsy twin of the apocalypse, Lindsey Graham, says Congress approved money for Israel on August 1st as a message to the administration to stop criticizing Israel about killing all those babies, about the civilian casualties. A senior Republican congressional aide said Israeli officials told senators they wanted the money sooner rather than later. Get that money out there. Cash Oji. Cash today. Right? That's what they're saying. And the last straw for many U.S. diplomats came on August 2nd when they say Israeli officials leaked to the media that Netanyahu had told the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, that the Obama administration was, quote, not to ever second-guess me again, unquote, about how to deal with Hamas. So the Secretary of State should butt out, the president should shut up, and the U.S. should deliver everything that Netanyahu wants. Well, this is the fecklessness, is letting warmonger allies run wild. It looks like these characters, right, from Lithuania and Poland and Britain to the Israelis and others, they think that they've gotten a blank check, carte blanche, from the United States. I don't think they have. I think they are choosing to interpret the fecklessness of Obama in this way. I would urge Obama to get somebody who could crack the whip, somebody who is not a feckless face man from the Horsey set like John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones, but get somebody who's an experienced bureaucratic infighter who knows what he's dealing with, crack the whip, and get these people to calm down. And the same thing goes for Biden. And, of course, this would depend on Obama realizing that you got to back off from the conflict with Russia, because this is, as Cohen, Professor Stephen Cohen and others say, and as I've said, starting in 2004, this is where you can get World War III with a very, very clear scenario. The other one, of course, is Maliki. Now, there has been this huge campaign against Maliki, right? Maliki was demonized to a fare thee well, reminds us of what was done to President Diem on religious grounds. Remember, Diem was a Catholic. Oh, how could he be a Catholic in the country with all those Buddhists? And now Maliki, oh, you're such a Shiite. You're overdoing it on the Shiite front. A lot of those Sunnis didn't want to negotiate. They didn't want to be included. They're like Republicans, we might say, right? You can't blame Obama for the Republicans being what they are. You can't blame Maliki if the Shiite sharifs are not amenable, right? If they're recalcitrant and refractory, which they often are. Now they got rid of him. How will that go? Well, back in Vietnam, the death of Diem practically doomed the entire U.S. Vietnam War effort before it even started. It was all an exercise in futility, or at least it had a heavy barrier to overcome. So Maliki is now out. Let's see if things improve now that he's out. So again, I would simply say this rogue network that I have written about for years is real. In other words, this thing that Netanyahu can appeal to and get what he wants, this thing that maybe the Ukrainians have figured that one out, right? We know the Ukrainians have been demanding all kinds of weaponry from the U.S. Maybe Netanyahu will share his secrets, or maybe, certainly quite possible, that Netanyahu requests weaponry from the Pentagon and then sells it to the Ukrainians. We've had that in the past, too, back in Iran-Contra in particular. So Iran-Contra-style networks that we've also heard from on 9/11 and also not heard from on 9/11 are coming to the fore. Hillary is running as a warmonger. She is a warmonger, and we can only assume that this rogue network under the fecklessness of a Hillary administration would simply become even worse. We have these interesting reports about Hillary as a person. Apparently she's become more poisonous than she was, right? This is also a very serious matter. The Secret Service is leaking again. The Secret Service is a sewer of all kinds of intelligence operations. The Secret Service really needs to be broken up. No president can trust the Secret Service after all of that drinking and all of those prostitutes in Latin America. But what the Secret Service is now saying is that she's the worst person to have to guard. Okay? It's a punishment to have to guard her because of her tremendous contempt for the people around her. She's as nasty as can be. So, serious on both sides. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. It's August 15th. It's Feria Augusta. This is also the day in 1971 when Nixon and Kissinger wantonly destroyed the Bretton Woods system. And they did it under British pressure. You can read this in Surviving the Cataclysm, Your Guide Through the Worst Financial Crisis in Human History. It was the British who were demanding about half or even more of the U.S. gold stock, and this is what forced the U.S. off the gold standard. Many blamed the French, but it was not the French. It was the British. It was their way of saying, thanks for saving us in the 1940s, Yank. And here we are on the verge of war now. Kiev claims their forces destroyed Russian tanks inside Ukraine, right? Is there a whiff of Sarajevo or more than a whiff? So we'll try to sum this up now in our last segment. But now we got to go to Nebraska, and the news, unfortunately, is news of enemy action. Dan Berdoff has been judged by the Board of Elections to be 270 signatures short. Now, that's out of almost 6,000 signatures, and it there's in the process quite a number of signatures have been disallowed. So I'm sure, Dan, that you're now going to undertake a line-by-line review of the material. And I'm wondering, above all, have they given you back the actual petitions where it's clear who they're rejecting?
Hello, Webster. Thanks very much for having me on your show.
Sure.
I have not. I just got the news today. They just got the results back in today, so I did not.
By phone, I take it, not a written
Correct.
Communication.
Correct.
Right.
It was by phone. It was an early an alert, and they will send me the other information shortly. So, yes, I did receive notice from the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections today. We were just around 200 short, not 270 short, about 207 short. And I'm very sorry to report that they found that we had fallen short in what we needed for ballot access. And as a result, we have begun exploring possibilities for an appeal based on our constitutional rights of free association and substantial compliance. And we are also looking and going to review those reports at the local election officials and the signature petitions themselves that were returned and reported on as we press forward. Additionally,
Right.
we're considering a write-in campaign to continue the fight if we have to, and I'm thinking about the hard work our volunteers did and the strong support of Nebraskans as well as our grassroots supporters around the country. And I know, speaking to them now, I know that I am in your debt, and I will keep fighting. And that's why we're looking at an appeal based on our First Amendment rights and free association, among other legal bases. And Webster, while I'm still in this race, I have to maintain my strong opposition to Mr. Ben Sasse. Mr. Sasse has exhibited a shameful pattern of outright negligence and incompetent leadership, and he is unfit to be U.S. Senator. And for an example, I want to look at when he was employed at Midland University. Mr. Sasse's subordinate, the athletic director, Jason Danley, preyed on vulnerable young women. And Danley threatened to kill one young woman if she didn't have sex with him and paid another for sex. And I don't know why Sasse didn't see this sign earlier. Why did he hire him, and what kind of judgment does this demonstrate? We have to do better in the U.S. Senate. And a similar thing happened when Sasse worked as a page proctor for the House Page program in the mid-'90s. While he oversaw the program, not one, but two congressmen resigned for sexually abusing high school students under Sasse's care in what is now known as the Mark Foley Pagegate scandal.
That would be
Mr.
Mark Foley and Jim Colber, right? Two Republican congressmen who were molesting the pages, and that was the job of Ben Sasse, Republican candidate for Senate in Nebraska. He was supposed to be the guardian
he was the
keeping
proctor
those
for the
children
Page program.
safe.
Yes. So Mr. Sasse couldn't manage a group of high school students. He employed a sexual predator to head up a women's sports program, and I think this shows he's not qualified to be senator. And he even oversaw the Department of Justice during the prosecution of Nebraska's best child welfare advocate, Carol Stitt, for, of all things, attending a speech given by Dr. Tom Osborne, the famous football coach and a man of renown in Nebraska. And if your listeners can recall this or know about this, Carol Stitt was the longtime head of the Nebraska Foster Care Review Board, and this was a serious persecution by the Department of Justice under false allegations, or false charges, maybe we would say, I think. They did it under the Hatch Act, which doesn't apply to state employees. It applies to federal employees. And then if you look at Mr. Sasse's religious views, they are extreme and inconsistent with Nebraska values. Like all faculty and trustees, as director of the Westminster Seminary in California, Mr. Sasse endorsed the 1647 Westminster Confession of Faith, and that's a document that declares the Pope to be the Antichrist.
That's heavy stuff with all those Catholic voters out there in Nebraska.
Please tell me again that, Webster?
Heavy-duty rhetoric when there are so many Catholic voters in Nebraska.
It's shameful. It's shameful, and it doesn't reflect the views of Nebraskans, let alone if they're Catholic or other types of Christians.
Right.
And he's used this CatholicVote.org as a front to hide his true dark feelings about the Catholic Church. It's really shameful. So he owes Nebraska Catholics an apology. And unfortunately for Nebraska voters, Ben Sasse has done a great job in hiding his real record from all of us. So, Webster, I didn't start this fight. The Nebraska Republican Party ran this unacceptable candidate in front of Nebraska voters. And the truth is, I am the only opposition candidate to Mr. Sasse in this race. Candidate Dave Domina doesn't attack Sasse, even though he's already about 20 points behind Sasse in every poll. And I'm very sorry for the setback in my campaign, but we won't quit now. And on a more positive note, we did have a lot of coverage in the AP this week. An AP story has hit in Nebraska and around the country, and we literally have mainstream coast-to-coast coverage of our platform. And this wire story mentions the two big platform points in the campaign, the Wall Street sales tax and the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. And this is as much...
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Webster. So there is good news. This is as much exposure for the two pillars of this platform in the mainstream media that I can remember in a long time. And this doesn't include the AP Wire stories that are in print in newspapers across the country that might not show up online. So
I saw it in a newspaper in Tampa, Florida.
That's correct. The Tampa Tribune, perhaps. I think it was printed there. So using this window of time between turning in the petitions and getting the results from the state of Nebraska was very fruitful, and that's why we're not quitting in our campaign. And, in fact, we've just gotten the best exposure and coverage since the campaign began. Besides the AP Wire story, we have stories and reports on local radio, including the big blowtorch radio station, KFAB 1110 out of Omaha, that broadcasts into 4 states, as well as KLIN 1240 in Lincoln, Nebraska. And this week we also had a story in the political column of the Lincoln Journal-Star by Don Walton, and I hope this makes the efforts, of which many of your listeners contributed, feel very worthwhile, and many people around the state contributed.
Absolutely worthwhile, and above all, you are performing a vital national service by exposing this guy Sass. Look at that pattern, all kinds of sexual misconduct, and he always seems to be on the scene with a watchdog responsibility, and he fails. That's the very least we can say.
I welcome your support at danfornebraska.com, Webster. Thank you very much. Whatever this,
there we go. Now
campaign, we're going to keep
fight
fighting.
That line by line. Fight that line by line, and come back next week and tell us that you've driven back this challenge. See you next Crisis Radio. So there you have it. The only candidate who's willing to tell the truth about Ben Sass and somehow falls short by 207 signatures, they claim. Now, he will be getting the package, right, with all the claims. In other words, the review of those signatures by the local boards of election. And I am hoping that a severe, implacable, line-by-line review of those signatures will turn this result around. Other than that, it is a matter of substantial compliance. And let me take this opportunity right now. If there are lawyers listening in, if there are people who are specialized in election law or human rights or other related fields that would be germane to such a topic, please come forward. Please send me an email. You go to tarpley.net. You look under the Speakers Bureau. There's a contact feature there. Please send me a communication and put lawyer or something similar, election lawyer, in the subject line, and I will try to pass you on to Dan Berdorf. So you can get the idea, right? This Nebraska establishment, right, for 20 years, their proclivities have been a national scandal, and this is the kind of results one gets. Remember that Sass is somebody who is supposedly on a fast track to the presidency, at least according to him, over the past 20 years. He thinks he's on track to be the 45th president of the United States. And that looks like it's pointing at 2016. It would be kind of a super Obama, right? Obama pioneering the idea, don't stay in the Senate, don't acquire a voting record, don't make enemies, just blow right through. And then as soon as you're in the Senate, begin organizing your presidential campaign. That means he'd have 2015. He'd have to start declaring for the presidency about 6 or 8 months into his tenure there in the Senate. But under conditions of the breakup of the Republican Party, it's quite feasible. So remember, danfornebraska.com, danfornebraska.com. A contribution for legal fees at this point would be most welcome. And you can hear it, though. Dan Berdorf is not a quitter, not going to give up. He's going to fight this one all the way through to November, making sure that however it comes out, Mr. Sass will not come out of this with a whole coat. He's going to have his record exposed. And this issue question, right, the Wall Street sales tax and the nationalization of the Fed will also be prominently displayed. Now we're hoping to hear from some other candidates of ours in a minute. Let me point out not only when we talk about Hillary as a warmonger, and again, what I'm asking you to do is join with me, help me, so we don't get to a situation where Hillary the warmonger is the only alternative to a Genghis Khan genocidal austerity Republican, maybe with appeals to the stoner vote and appeals to the anti-war vote, because you can see Little Rand is trying to go in those directions. Those don't mean anything, because you know very well with Little Rand or with Cruz who you're going to get in the posts, right? Well, Little Rand already made his deal with William Crystal of the Weekly Standard in the fall of his election campaign. He made a pilgrimage to the offices of the Weekly Standard and swore obeisance to the neocon foreign policy outlook. So that's the question. If you get any Republican, you're going to get the same neocons that you saw on the Romney list, the same neocons that brought you Benghazi, the people like Bolton, like Senior, and of course Senior's union-busting wife, Campbell Brown. She'll be around. You get the idea. Any Republican, it's going to be a neocon foreign policy. Doesn't matter what they say. You can tell from the personnel. They smell. Okay? So that's that side of it. So therefore, let us not, please, get to a situation where Hillary is the only alternative to that, because there are some Republicans that might momentarily make Hillary look good. So let's not get to that. Let's get an actual viable candidate among the Democrats through some combination of developments inside that party and to the left of that party, critically stated. And of course, the Dan Burdorf campaign, right? We've got to get voices in the states on the congressional level this year that are going to put out the necessary policies, both on the economic front and the war avoidance front. So imagine Krauthammer whining that if Russia invades Ukraine, it would be a singular violation of the post-Cold War order, a humiliating demonstration of American helplessness, and a shock to the Baltic republics, Poland, and other vulnerable U.S. allies. And therefore, you can't worry about Russia. You got to worry about the Baltic republics, Poland, and other vulnerable U.S. allies. Maybe Georgia, okay, maybe Moldova. No, I'm sorry. We've got to have a modus vivendi with Russia. That is the minimum necessary demanded by the interests of the United States, right? And not these bums, right? This sort of schoolyard macho mentality they love to play with. All right. We're hoping that the fascist Scott Walker can be defeated in Wisconsin. We've noted the demagoguery of Little Rand. Now, for Hillary, though, the Clintons are pandering to Julian Castro. This is now the Castro brothers, Joaquin, who is in the Congress, and Julian, who is now going to become the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. The Clintons are grooming this group to become their Hispanic fig leaf. The idea being that Julian Castro might be a vice presidential candidate, and Clinton has already earmarked Julian Castro as a future president. So now it is what I thought, that we're getting competing centers of Manchurian candidates. We're getting the Ben Sasse candidacy, backed at least by some powerful and rich Republican sources, and then on the other side, the Clinton machine saying we'll get a Hispanic candidate, Julian Castro, and that will be the future. So imagine 2020, Julian Castro against Ben Sasse or something like this. No, 1,000 times no. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's our edition for Friday, August 15th, 2014. Now we want to go on to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and get a report on the battle for democracy against fascism in Benton Harbor and in Michigan in general. You remember the situation, the attempt to organize a recall election against the puppet of the Whirlpool Corporation, therefore a Wall Street puppet by the name of Hightower, and how Reverend Pinckney was then arrested for allegedly for circulating petitions taking the Democratic route of taking it to the ballot box. And we're now going through the sequela of that. So, Reverend, welcome. What is the update?
Webster, I tell you, we have had a tremendous week. Since the last time we spoke, I tell you, the events have turned almost in our favor. I tell you, we had a hearing on August the 7th, and the attorney told the judge, the county counselor, the sheriff department that they all had dirty hands. And then on Tuesday, he ruled that the election will go forward. He said Mayor James Hightower has been recalled. He said we had enough signatures to do it, and now he's looking forward. We're moving forward with this situation, and as of today, Mayor James Hightower has been officially recalled. And yet and still, the trial of Reverend Edward Pinckney will go on. But we're prepared mentally to do whatever needs to be done. We had such a great week this week that I'm happy to be on your show. I really didn't want to miss telling the audience today the event that happened, because we very seldom get victories. And this was a major victory, because never before in the history of Berrien County or in Michigan have a judge ruled in favor of the people in reference to something like this. And he ruled in favor of the people. So it was a tremendous, tremendous victory. We had people that came down from Detroit, and they was excited about the whole thing, even though their water situation have kind of like been resolved since since we had that mass demonstration. But things are now moving in the right direction. We're doing things. We're making sure, because if you don't fight, you can't win. And Webster, that's what we do. We fight here in this city, and we fight everything that's not right. I always say it's not one thing, it's everything. That's the problem.
Tremendous. Reverend, you are an example. You're an inspiration to many people. One of our earlier segments, we're fighting now to get a guy on our candidate for Senate in Nebraska, Dan Berdoff. They just said you're 207 signatures short, and the answer is keep fighting. But let me ask you, on the one hand, the judge says the recall is legal and the vote will go forward. I guess that's in November?
That is November 4th. The mayor and Marcus Muhammad both will be on the ballot.
Okay, but at the same time, they say you've done something wrong. How do they make that coexist? How can that mix?
Here's what they did. They had two main objectives. One, to stop that election for May 6th, which they did. It was stopped illegally. We had more than enough signatures for the election to go on. And number two, they wanted to send me to prison. That's the biggest thing. They figure if they cut me off, it'll stop the whole movement in the state of Michigan, which is not true. I'm just one part of it. That's all I am.
Okay. And when does that trial go on again?
The trial is October the 27th, and also the election, the jury selection is October the 24th. The trial begins my birthday, October the 27th. So we will be prepared to go forward. We will be prepared to do the things that need to be done, and we'll continue to fight this battle. Just the other day, they tried to take some land from the people with this. Remember, we no longer have the emergency manager. What we have is 4 emergency managers. That's what we have right now as we speak. And what we did, They wanted to take over this plot of land. It's only about 2 acres. But they wanted to build this house, one house on 2 acres of land. So you can imagine how big that house was going to be. We protested that day. We protested until they had to rescind that. Because that's what I believe. I believe that if we're going to do something, we have to show them that we're willing to stand up and willing to go to jail if necessary. So that's one of the things. Like I tell you, Wes, we had such a wonderful week this week. I don't even know how to describe it.
Well, if you get a decent jury, they're going to have a very hard time pinning that rap on you, I would say.
Oh, Webster, no, there's not a doubt in my mind. They're scared themselves. They don't know what to do. They don't know what Pinckney gonna come up with. But believe me, they're thinking about it. They're thinking about how we going to defeat Pinckney and send him to jail. That's all they care about. They don't care about law. They don't care about honesty. They don't care about anything. Only thing they care about, they want to send Pinckney to jail and show how they control the city of Ann Arbor and the state of Michigan. That's what's happening today.
All right, Reverend. Now, people have to help you. You're going to need, obviously, lawyers, other expenses. Please remind everybody how they can reach out to you and be part of this struggle, which I think people are going to want to do.
Absolutely, and I am so happy that people are reaching out. You can go to my website, BHBANCO.org. That's BHBANCO.org. Banco. You can donate right there. You can call me at 269-925-0001. That's 269-925-0001. Now, I want you to go to my website and sign my petition. We got a petition to get rid of the prosecutor there. Please sign that petition and donate, because we need all the resources we can to fight this monster, and we're going to win this battle. That's the most important thing. So go to BHBANCO.org, Banco, and sign my petition, and please leave a donation if you can.
Great. A great voice in a great cause. And congratulations to you, Reverend. Now, you're telling us that the then be decided on November 4th. And who is the opposition candidate, briefly?
Is Marcus Muhammad. He's our candidate, and they have the puppet himself, Mayor James Hightower. And I don't know what I should be calling him mayor now since he's been recalled officially. Maybe I could just call him by his name, James Hightower.
Okay. And in the couple of seconds we have left, any word from Detroit, from the Snyder situation, the water situation?
Well, the water, we're trying to work that out. We have stopped them from cutting the waters off right now. They do not cut the water off anymore because of that tremendous protest. And what we're doing now, we are neutralizing them on another angle to make sure they don't start cutting them off 2 months down the road. So we're doing what we're supposed to do. Protest, protest, protest. Fight back, fight back, fight back. If you fight back, you can win. If you don't fight back, you can't win. It's just that simple.
And that is the lesson. All right. That's the end of our segment, Reverend. Hats off to you. More power to you. bhbanco.org. And give us an update next week. We'll be looking forward to it. I
will definitely do so. Thank you so much.
Okay. And we'll be back in a second with our concluding segment here on August 15th, 2014. Welcome back to our final segment. It's Ferragosto, August 15th, 2014. It's the anniversary of Nixon Kissinger destroying the Bretton Woods system in 1971. And it's the Feast of the Ascension and certain other religious holidays. We would like to add our voice to the appeal coming from the Russian media. Save our guys, hashtag save our guys, and hashtag free Andrew. This is Andrei Stenin, Russian photographer held prisoner by the Kiev fascist clique. Save our guys and free Andrew. Now, the the question of perfide Albion, right? The attempt, obviously, of Cameron to damage Germany, Italy, and France, right, by creating problems vis-a-vis Russia, right? This endless game of the British Foreign Office, divide et impera, right? That's their long-standing maxim, learned from the Venetians back in the 1500s and 1600s. The question then points us back towards World War I, right? And the monstrous perfidy displayed by Sir Edward Grey. George V ordered him, find a pretext for war, Grey, and did. It was Belgium, and he grabbed it with both hands and his teeth. Now, let's begin to look, though. We're passing through these 100-year anniversaries. The great issue of the months of August and September is the German deployment, right, the Aufmarsch, and the execution or not of the Schlieffen Plan. And we don't want to quibble too much about whether it's the Schlieffen Plan word for word or whether it's the modified Schlieffen Plan. Fine. We won't make too much of a formalistic issue out of that. Above all, we're going to have to look at the competence of Helmut von Moltke, Moltke, the younger. The elder had been the victor of Sadowa in 1866, the 7 Weeks' War between Prussia and Austria, won by Prussia, and then the Franco-Prussian War 1870-71, which knocked British puppet Napoleon III. This younger Moltke, however, was much inferior to his illustrious uncle. And therefore, we have to look at, was his deployment adequate? And then, above all, in the critical moment at the first Battle of the Marne, in the first 10 days of September, right, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th of September being the key days, what was Moltke doing? And it also focuses on his envoy, the infamous Richard Hench. Think of the henchmen. Moltke's henchman, Hench, Hentzsch, lieutenant colonel from the general staff, who, according to many versions, actually ordered the retreat of the German armies when they were in a not unassailable, but nevertheless possibly victorious position. In other words, these questions of what Machiavelli would have called virtù, meaning human quality. Doesn't mean virtue. It means what makes you human. Or Entschlossenheit, this is a little bit narrower, the Entschlossenheit, the decisiveness, as it is referred to by von Clausewitz. So we're talking about the Schlieffen Plan. And you have to look now, what is the social situation of these officers? One of the things that pops up with Moltke, and we'll have to talk about this in some detail, is that he is surrounded by occultists. And we've pointed to the fact that the last years of the 19th century and the pre-1914 period is this time of tremendous growth of Freemasonic lodges, occultism, theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, we've got Annie Besant, we've got clairvoyance, we've got mediums. When you said the media today, you mean news media. In those days, when you said the media, you're meaning a bunch of people who claim that they can talk to the dead and they can communicate from beyond the grave. Now, remember, this is highly relevant, and we've got to start thinking. You look at Petraeus, right? What did we find out in November 2012 about Petraeus and his friend General Allen? We found that they were surrounded by people like Paula Broadwell, by Jill Kelly there in Tampa at the Central Command. We know that Petraeus is highly connected to the Kagan, Kimberly Kagan and Frederick Kagan of the neocon establishment. We know that Petraeus is now under the guidance of Kravis, Henry Kravis from the Kohlberg Kravis Roberts Wall Street hedge fund hyena firm. We got to look at Moltke, because the problem with Moltke may come down to this, that his wife, Countess von Moltke, was in touch with a medium, a woman called Lisbeth Zeidler, Seidler. And Elizabeth Zeidler's nickname, if you can believe it or not, was the Sibyl of the Army. The Sibyl, right? We know the Cumaean Sibyl. We know from Virgil, I believe, the Sibyl. The Sibyls were these sort of local seers, clairvoyants, women who could, various versions of the Pythoness at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. So Elizabeth Zeidler was in cahoots with his wife. So Countess von Moltke came with Lisbeth Zeidler to Koblenz during August of 1914. But even before she got there, she called her husband. Countess von Moltke calls the supreme commander of the German forces east and west, that is to say, Count Helmut von Moltke, and says, "Guess what, darling? We've just gotten word from beyond the grave, from the spirit world, the astral plane, and Lisbeth Zeidler has gotten the view from the astral plane. And guess what it is, darling? Well, tell me what it is. What is it? It's that you're going to be defeated, that the German position is hopeless, even though it looks like you're sweeping all opposition before you. You've swept through Luxembourg, Belgium with some delay. You lost a few days, okay, but you're now practically at the gates of Paris, and these German and British forces have been reeling. They're defeated. They're demoralized. They're in full retreat. Not clear whether they'll be able to make a stand anywhere. But the word from the astral plane by way of Lisbeth Zeidler is, you're defeated. And Moltke, the character of Moltke, well, let's just, I just want to give you a kind of a view from a possibly official historian. David Fromkin, right? David Fromkin wrote A Peace to End All Peace. This is now Europe's Last Summer, Who Started the Great War in 1914. Fromkin, of course, an academic, but not the worst, but of course Anglophile, right? That it's a German-Austrian conspiracy and the British are blameless. So here's Fromkin. For nearly a century, debate has raged among participants and then among scholars about the decisive battle with which the Moltke concluded. This was the Battle of the Marne, September 1914. On the German side, the question was whether it was Moltke or his young envoy, Richard Hensch, the henchman, who ordered the retreat and regroupment behind the Marne. It's actually not behind the Marne. It's behind the Aisne, A-I-S-N-E, 40 Ks to the north. And whether withdrawal was correct, was it the correct decision, or whether it snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. That is the problem which Fromkin at least recognizes. We'll be discussing that during August and into September. So happy Agosto all around, and we'll be back next week, God willing.